Well, back when I first started learning languages about 20 something years ago, I used a whole bunch of these things, these index cards. I seriously spent more money on these index cards than I want to admit, and it was a pain to manage this system. I would write words on one side and the definition on the back. For years, I would spend an hour or two every Saturday evening just writing these things up. Well, it's not a great system, especially if your handwriting is as bad as mine. Now, this is printed, of course, if you can see it, but when I would make this before, I would write it out by hand myself. I really had no long-term review system. My cards would get crinkled up because I would cut these index cards up and put them in my back pocket, and I didn't have any method to prevent myself from learning the same word over and over again, so I needed something different. And that's why I became interested in Anki. Now, Anki is completely free, and you can think of it as a sort of super index card system. It allows you to create your own database of cards, and it provides a lot of flexibility and features that will blow your mind once you see them. However, there is a learning curve when you first start using the software. So let me show you slowly the way that I create cards and some of the things that I keep in mind. Now, this channel is mostly about Chinese literature, so we will focus on my method for creating Chinese cards in Anki. However, the principles I show you here can be used for any language and really anything you want to learn. So let's jump in. Anki is really easy to locate and download. It's also easy to install, especially on Windows. Of course, as you can see here, this is a virtual machine since I usually use Linux. Now, installation on Linux is a little bit more complex depending upon which distro you use. I use Arch, by the way, and I actually tend to use Flatpak these days after having some odd issues with the latest version of Anki in the AUR, but that's probably a topic for a different video. Now, when you start up, you choose the language you want Anki's interface to be in, and as you can see, there are a lot of languages to choose from. And then, once you've chosen your language, you're given this screen. As you can see, nothing has been installed. If you click Browse, you'll see that you have nothing. Now, if you look at the left-hand side here, you'll notice that there are different note types. We need to stop here and explain the terminology. And no, this isn't obvious, nor is it really easy to understand. I mean, I've used this software for over a decade now, and I still get these terms mixed up. Okay, in Anki, there are two different concepts. There are notes and there are cards. A note is a database entry that contains information. When you have Anki set up the way you want it, notes will contain a bunch of different fields. You can customize what you want those fields to include and what you want to call them, as you can see here. Cards, meanwhile, are the things that you see when you go through your daily Anki study. So think of notes as being sort of like words in a glossary, except that there are unlimited numbers of fields associated with each word. And then you can think of those cards as Anki's equivalent of flashcards, except that you can have more than two sides. And that's where stuff becomes confusing. You can have an unlimited number of cards that are associated with each note. This is useful because it means that we can study the same note in a whole bunch of different ways. And the note, of course, doesn't have to be a word. It can be a phrase, it can be a sentence, it can be a poem, it could be a paragraph, it could be a picture. The sky's the limit. Pretty cool, huh? Now, the first thing you're going to want to do to orient yourself in Anki is to click on the Add button. See this thing that says Type here? This refers to the type of note that you have. Anki comes with 6 different types of notes out of the box. If you choose Manage, you can delete those note types. And if you click on Add, you can clone one of the default note types to make it into what you want, assuming you don't want to get rid of the default types. Now, in my personal deck, I have different note types for every language I study, as you can see here. There's a reason why I do this. I do this because I can prevent myself from learning the same word multiple times in the same language. And it's also because I can then create different entries for words with the same spelling in different languages. I'll give you an example of this. Well, say that you're learning both English and German. Maybe you want to learn what the word gift means in English. It's a present. Now, in German, there is also a word gift spelled the same way with a much different meaning, poison. If we stick those words together using the same note type, we might get confused. We don't know what language we're using. And Anki will warn us that we've got 2 notes with the same entry. That's the show duplicates thing on top. You can customize your Anki notes to tell the software which field to look at when it looks for duplicates. Again, there's a whole bunch of cool things you can do to make sure that you're not learning the same word or phrase over and over again, stuff that you can't do if you're using this puppy. But some of that is a little bit off the subject for this video. Now let's go back and see how to set up notes and create a whole bunch of custom cards. Well, I mentioned that we want to create notes for Chinese, so let's do that. Go first to Add, click on the box next to Type. Then let's click on Add and just clone the basic note. This way we'll take a look at everything that goes on when you create a note in cards. I've called it Chinese. Now we select the note type, Chinese. We probably want to have more than one field, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with making cards with two fields. It's just like those index cards that I mentioned, right? You got the front side, you got the back side. But we can really do a whole lot more than just that. And I personally like to give my fields specific names. Click on the Fields button and you'll get this screen. So for our Chinese field, the one that we want to sort by, let's just call that Chinese. I'll change front to Chinese. One reason why I don't like the names front and back is because we're going to swap those fields around on both the front and back sides of these cards. We have to think beyond just having the front side and the back side. We're going to have more sides to these cards. You'll see in a second. Instead of back, let's call it definition. Now you can see that we can add more fields if we want to. And if you study Chinese, you already know that there are other things that are helpful. Pinyin, for example, or the romanization of the word. So let's add in a pinyin field. Now, I like to create a field called grammar as well to help sort things out. You'll see why in a few minutes. And since this is Chinese, I also like to create a field for simplified variants. We'll call that simplified. So when I started off with Anki, I had different notes for traditional and simplified Chinese characters. The reason why is because I was thinking this way, front and back. I've learned over time that it's actually a lot easier to combine them and just create additional fields. This is also true when you're dealing with languages like Japanese, where you've got to worry about kanji, or Korean, where if you're crazy like me, you want to learn hanja. It can also help with learning the genders of nouns in European languages, learning verb conjugation, all sorts of stuff like that. Creating a lot of different fields in a single note is easy and very powerful. You seriously should do this. Now, we should probably have a field for sound, though I'm not going to get into how I generate sound in this particular video. And for sorting purposes, I also like to have a field for language. So there you go, 7 fields. Once you save the changes, you'll see that you can write all sorts of stuff into each field. Of course, it's just a database tool. The program does not automatically know what should go into each field. You have to manage that part yourself. I'll copy an example over from my massive master deck so that you can see. Here's a good one, the idiom 小不经事. It means young and inexperienced in life. Maybe that's still a good description of me. Anyway, it's an idiom and there's the pinyin. Now, there is a simplified variant as well because of that Jing character, so let's put that in. We're not going to worry about the sound field today. Like I said, we'll deal with that later. The language is Chinese, so we'll write that in. And then come the tags. Tags are really useful in Anki. Think of them like tags on your blog. They're especially useful though if you've got a whole bunch of different note types and decks that do a whole bunch of different things. The trick though is to make sure that you keep your tags manageable. I'll write in Chinese and idiom just in case I want to only look at Chinese stuff one day or only look at idioms. Push enter after you've typed in every tag field that you want. And then you click add. Now that we've got a note, we can work on making the cards. You can edit cards from that add screen. However, to make things a little bit easier, I'll go into the browse screen instead. Now, when you click on the cards button, you'll see that a card has been filled out by default. The front side has what used to be the front field, what we now call Chinese. The back side has what used to be the back field, what we now call definition. Now, you might not know HTML, but it's really not that hard to figure out what's going on here. The brackets tell Anki to present the thing that's in between the brackets, the field name. This particular one says the front side of the same card, the side that we saw before. Now there's this HRID equals answer bit, but we'll just leave that as it is. We're not going to even worry about that. And then there are brackets around the definition field after which the definition is displayed. The brackets say display the definition field. Now we have more fields than that and we can display them. In fact, it's a lot easier than you think it is. So in this particular case, we want to test ourselves on the definition of the word in Chinese, right? Well, let's start by renaming this card to meaning. That way it will make it easier for us to figure out what we need to fix if there's a problem later. Now, the key to getting these cards to work in your brain is to only test yourself on one single thing at a time. You don't want to be thinking about how to say the word when you're supposed to think about the definition of the word. Now, I know that sounds silly and you think, well, I could do both at once. Trust me, you don't want to. Make it as easy and as simple as possible for your brain. This is why I include the pronunciation on the front side of this particular card. So these BR things between the chevrons tell Anki to create new spaces. We'll then type in the pinyin field surrounded by brackets. See, in the preview field, as soon as I type it in correctly, the pinyin appears and you can see that the spacing is right. Now, I'm going to type in a sound field here as well, even though we're not going to get into sound today. This is for the future when we add in our sounds. Nothing displays since there's nothing in the sound field for now to display. And we also don't need to add in those line breaks because we'll listen to the sound file, we won't look at it. I like to add in a sound field on the backside as well so I can listen to the word pronounced twice. Now, it's kind of empty and impersonal to just, have the word show up. And it can be confusing if you're reviewing multiple languages with similar spelling or similar characteristics. So I like to add a little something at the top. Before the word, I like to add in a little bit of instructions to myself. What does this language grammar mean? Well, this automatically changes to what does this Chinese idiom mean since I'm pointing to the fields for both language and grammar. And now we add in our spaces to make it look nicer. Now you can do a lot of stuff here, especially if you know a little bit of CSS or HTML. You can change colors, you can change fonts, you can change font sizes, you can do just about anything that you imagine. Okay, now we save that, and now we can add another card. We go back to cards, go to options and add card type, then click on proceed. We'll name this one reading. Here we want to test our ability to read the word, as in read it aloud. Remember, we want to do bite-sized learning, one thing at a time. We will only test ourselves on one specific thing per card. So we rename this one to reading. Now you can see here that it's copied everything over from the same card. However, we do want to make a few changes. Let's start from the top. We want to read this language grammar. Now if we're reading it, we don't want the pinyin there on the front, that spoils it. We also don't want the sound on the front since we're testing ourselves on how to read the character. Let's get rid of the spoiler. But we do want the definition on the front since we're not testing ourselves on what the character means. And instead of the definition on the back, we want the pinyin. Then we click on Save. Now when we go to cards, we can see that we have two different types of cards for the same note. Let's add some more, keeping in mind, of course, that we only want a card to ask us to do one single specific thing. For example, I like to make cards that test my listening comprehension, though my wife tells me I'm a bad listener. So we add another card. Let's call this one listening. We'll only have the sound at the front along with the language and type of grammar, of course. And on the back, we'll include everything else. And there's another one that I love doing, handwriting. I spend time every day practicing writing Chinese characters. To prompt myself, I use certain cards in Anki along with my normal daily Anki study. So let's create a handwriting card. We'll call this Please Write This Language Grammar by Hand. Now, we don't want the characters on the front, but we do want everything else. And on the back, we'll have the Chinese show up. Now, there's one thing that we haven't touched on yet, the difference between simplified and traditional Chinese characters. Remember, we added different fields for those, right? It took me a little while to figure this out, but there is a trick that I do to make it so that the program will only tell me it's a traditional character if there is also a simplified character for the same note. So let's go back to the front. We're going to create a conditional which looks like this. The part with the number sign in front of it tells the program to only include what is after it if there's something in that field, the simplified field. The part after with that slash tells the computer to stop. It's like the bottom piece of bread in a sandwich. As long as you don't have anything in the simplified field of your note, this will only ask you to write the Chinese idiom by hand. If you do have something in the simplified field, though, it will ask you to write the traditional Chinese idiom by hand. This is a huge time saver since it means we don't have to make a bunch of different note types just for simplified Chinese characters. Trust me, because I did that for years. This is also something that is not that well known. I can tell you that because I've looked at a whole bunch of those downloadable shared Anki decks. Nobody does this, even though it's easy. Now we can also use this knowledge to make very specific card types that are only for simplified Chinese. Let's add a new card type. We'll call this simplified reading. Now let's go over to our reading card type and just copy it over. We'll do the backside as well. And now we write that conditional at the beginning and at the end of our front side. Now if you spell things correctly, it will work. Now let's change that Chinese field to simplified since we only want to see the simplified characters. And now we save. Because the entire front side is surrounded by that conditional sandwich, it makes it so that the card type is not generated at all if that simplified field is empty. Again, when you understand how this works in Anki's logic and in its database structure, you'll see just how powerful this can be. We can do the exact same thing, for example, with handwriting. Let's create a simplified handwriting card type. Again, we'll just copy things from the handwriting card type. Now we put up the conditional sandwich. And since we know we're only going to see this card if there's something in the simplified field, we can remove the other conditional sandwich. We then will change the Chinese field on the back to read simplified, and then we save. Well, there you have it. Now you know how to test yourself on reading, writing, speaking, and listening, all from the same Anki note. Well, as you can see, one note now gives us 6 different card types, and it was really easy to make. And you can do a lot more than just that. I'll show you more tricks in the future. Seriously, if you're using these old index cards, you really need to stop. You need to switch over to Anki. I mean, it's free and it's easy to learn, and I'm going to teach you how to use it. And if you're already using Anki, stop downloading ready-made decks. It's easier to make your own custom database. It seriously is. You can get rid of all the garbage that's in those decks, and it's a lot more useful for your learning once you do this. More later. Bye.